They survived the hurricane, but not the days that followed. The wind stopped screaming, yet the silence that came after was worse. Streets flooded not with water, but with confusion. Phones, dead. Banks, offline. ATMs, empty. People stood in lines, clutching useless cards like relics of a world that no longer worked. Mothers begged for baby formula, men shouted at dead machines, and everyone waited for a system that had already abandoned them. Evelyn whispered, "We made everything digital, but what happens when digital disappears?" The truth hit harder than the storm. Survival wasn't about strength anymore, it was about access. And that access was gone. Because when money dies, humanity follows. Tell me, if your lifeline vanished tonight, would you be ready? Subscribe to Zelly Digital Dilemma, because what happened to them could happen to any of us. Angela had always been the planner, the one who double-checked the locks, tested the generator twice, and made sure the kids knew where the flashlights were. Her pantry looked like a miniature store, labeled cans, neatly stacked batteries, and gallons of water lined in rows. Even when the news screamed Category 5 approaching, she didn't panic. She prepared. But when Hurricane Owen came tearing across Florida, it didn't just rip through houses and streets, it ripped through the illusion of safety. 3 days after the storm, the air still smelled of salt and metal. The neighborhood looked like a battlefield. Twisted power lines, shattered windows, and roofs peeled back like tin. Angela and Tom counted themselves lucky. Their home stood, scarred but standing. What didn't survive was everything invisible. The grid, the connection, the system they'd built their entire lives on. At first, it was just inconvenient. No Wi-Fi, no lights, no gas. They cooked on a camping stove, laughed it off, and told ghost stories by candlelight. But when the gas station refused their card and the grocery store's registers blinked, network error, that calm dissolved into dread. Tom tried his phone wallet, offline. Tried another card, declined. The cashier shrugged helplessly. "Cash only, ma'am." Angela froze. She hadn't carried bills in months. Everything, from groceries to school supplies, came through the same glowing rectangle now lying useless in her hand. She drove across town looking for an ATM, passing lines of people clutching their phones like broken compasses. Every screen flashed the same silent betrayal. Service unavailable. By the second day, neighbors began trading. A gallon of water for a loaf of bread, batteries for fuel. But Angela's money was trapped somewhere inside dead servers, beyond the blackout, unreachable. She tried to keep her composure for the kids, smiling as she served the last cans of beans. Inside, she was unraveling. How do you explain to a child that food still exists? You just can't buy it anymore. That night, Tom whispered, "We'll be okay, Angie. Power will be back soon." She wanted to believe him, but she saw the doubt in his eyes, the same quiet terror she felt. Because the lights could return, the houses could be rebuilt, but something deeper had broken. And as she stared at her phone, that cold, black mirror, Angela realized the truth every modern family fears but never says out loud. We didn't lose power, we lost control. Angela's heart pounded as she stood in that grocery line, the fluorescent lights flickering like the last pulse of a dying system. Around her, frustration thickened the air, murmurs, sighs, and a few angry shouts. A woman at the next register was begging the cashier to hold her groceries until the app came back. Another man slammed his useless phone against the counter, shouting, "My money's right there. Just let me pay." But there was nothing anyone could do. The network was gone, and with it went the world everyone depended on. Angela stared at her screen, that spinning circle mocking her with every loop. The cashier avoided eye contact, scanning item after item that no one could buy. "System offline," he repeated, like a funeral bell tolling for the death of convenience. Her kids clutched the shopping basket, hungry, silent. She forced a smile. "It's okay, sweethearts. We'll figure it out." But inside she was falling apart. She could fight a storm, rebuild a roof, survive a flood, but she couldn't fight a broken algorithm. She stepped outside, the sun scorching the parking lot, people scattered around like lost signals. Some were arguing. Others sat quietly, staring at their dead phones as if sheer will could bring them back to life. Angela saw an old man trying to pay for bread with crumpled bills, only for the clerk to shake his head. Digital only. The irony burned. They'd built a society that could put a man on Mars but couldn't sell him a loaf of bread without Wi-Fi. That night, she rationed what little food they had left. The kids asked when things would go back to normal. "Soon," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the word. Tom tried calling the utility company, nothing but static. Their bank app remained frozen, their balances locked behind a wall of error messages and loading screens. They weren't poor. They just couldn't reach their money. And in this new world, that was the same thing. By day 4, hunger had a voice. A sharp, desperate whisper that made neighbors turn on each other. Someone broke into a corner store. Someone else traded jewelry for gas. A single loaf of bread became worth more than a week's wages. Angela found herself counting cans by candlelight, calculating how long they could stretch what was left. The kids were pale and quiet, asking less and less with each passing hour. When she finally ventured out again, the air felt heavier. Lines outside stores stretched down entire blocks. Police guarded supermarkets, not from looters, from the hopeless. She overheard one officer say, "They're calling it a digital freeze. Servers fried. Banks say they're working on it." Angela almost laughed. Working on it? People were starving, crying, and trading scraps, and the system that promised to protect them was just working on it. She went home empty-handed again that night, staring at the cold glow of her powerless phone. A storm had taken her house once, but this was different. This storm lived inside the machines, inside the code that people worshipped like gods. And now that those gods had gone silent, humanity was learning what silence really sounds like. Angela lay awake beside her children, listening to their small breaths in the dark. The walls creaked, the generator next door hummed faintly, and she thought about all the years she trusted the tap, the swipe, and the convenience. Now she finally understood. They hadn't built a smarter world, just a more fragile one. And one power outage was all it took to remind everyone how breakable progress really is. Angela stood there, gripping the worn bills in her shaking hand, 410s that suddenly felt like ancient relics. Her throat tightened as the clerk avoided her eyes, tapping helplessly on a dark terminal that wouldn't respond. The hum of the generator outside mixed with the sound of people arguing over gas, voices cracking under the weight of desperation. The world she knew, organized, efficient, connected, was gone, replaced by something raw and merciless. She stepped outside, the heat pressing down like punishment. A mother argued with a delivery driver. She was waving a wad of cash, but he just shook his head. They said no physical payments. An old man next to the pumps cursed at his phone, yelling, "My card's good. It's not me, it's you." Angela almost wanted to laugh, a hollow, bitter sound, because she'd said the same thing 2 days ago. Now she knew better. It wasn't any of them. It was the system itself, and it had abandoned them all. Tom sat in the car, pale and sweating. His meds were nearly gone. Angela tried to stay calm, but she could hear the rattle in his breathing and the tremor in his hands. She'd faced hurricanes before, boarded windows, flooded streets, shattered roofs. But this storm had no warning sirens, no sandbags to fight it off. It was invisible, coded into every moment of their lives. And it had left them stranded, not by floodwater, but by firewalls. She clutched the $40 tighter, as if willing it to matter again. "We'll find a way," she told him, though the words tasted like lies. They drove from station to station, store to store, but every sign said the same thing. Card only. Network offline. No cash accepted. Every place that might have saved them was locked behind digital gates. By afternoon, people started bartering openly. A man traded his wedding ring for 2 bottles of water. A woman offered gasoline in exchange for baby formula. Angela approached a couple with a small table. They had canned food and medicine laid out. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "my husband needs his meds. I'll give you whatever I can." They looked at the cash, then at her. "We don't need money," one of them said softly. "We need power banks, batteries, and signal." That night, Angela sat on the porch of their half-flooded home, staring at the useless glow of her phone's dead screen. She could see her reflection, tired, desperate, fading, and behind her, her children sleeping against Tom's chest, unaware that their entire safety net had vanished. The digital world that once made her feel in control had turned into a silent judge, deciding who lived comfortably and who begged at empty counters. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, maybe for a fire, maybe for another life hanging in the balance of a broken connection. Angela closed her eyes, her fingers brushing the crumpled bills still in her pocket. They used to mean everything. Now they were just paper. For the first time, she truly understood what had happened. They weren't just disconnected, they'd been erased. Not by hackers or storms, but by their own dependence. Her family wasn't poor. They were digitally invisible, and in this new kind of world, that was the same as being Angela's gone. Heart cracked open right there on that cracked asphalt. The man's smirk, the way he said payment didn't go through, like it was a joke, burned into her memory. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at the empty can he'd refused to fill, as if realizing for the first time that the world wasn't broken. It had been programmed this way. The hurricane had only exposed what was already rotting underneath, a system designed to control, not to serve. Jake tugged on her arm. "Mom, let's go," he whispered, but his voice was shaking. Behind them, people were shouting. A fight had broken out over a loaf of bread. Somewhere, glass shattered. A woman screamed. Angela grabbed her son's hand and pulled him close. They started walking again, past boarded-up windows and hollow-eyed faces lit by the blue glow of dead phones. Every step felt heavier, not from exhaustion but from the crushing truth. This wasn't a world recovering from disaster. This was a world revealing its true face. By nightfall, they reached an abandoned rest stop. The lights were out, but someone had scrawled words on the wall in black paint. "The system never fails. IT just restarts without you." Angela stared at it, the words flickering in the faint glow of her flashlight. Her son read them too, then looked at her, eyes wide, scared. "Mom, what if it never comes back?" She wanted to lie, to tell him things would get better, that help was coming. But she couldn't. Because deep down she knew help wasn't coming. The network might flicker back one day, but the trust, the control, the illusion that they were safe, that was gone forever. They slept in the car that night, surrounded by silence. Not peaceful, but hollow, electric silence. Angela watched the sky, cloudless now, calm and cruel. She thought about Tom, growing weaker without his medication, and about the neighbors they'd left behind. The same ones who used to laugh at her for saving coins in jars, just in case. Maybe she'd been right all along. Maybe this was the case no one wanted to imagine. In the distance, faint lights flickered, generators maybe, or maybe something else. But she didn't move. She sat there, holding her son close, whispering, "We'll keep walking. We'll find somewhere that still remembers how to live without a scream." And as the wind carried the faint hum of broken machines across the empty highway, Angela realized the truth she'd been avoiding since the storm began. The real disaster wasn't the hurricane. It was how easily the world fell apart once the signal did. For the first time, she didn't look at her phone for answers. She looked at her son, at the road, at the stars. Because maybe survival wasn't about reconnecting. Maybe it was about remembering. Angela stared out the windshield, her reflection ghosted against the faint moonlight, hollow eyes, trembling lips, and a silence that felt heavier than the storm itself. Tom's wheezing grew faint and ragged. Every breath sounded like the ticking of a clock running out. She gripped his hand, cold with sweat, and whispered, "Just hold on, please." But there was no one to call, no app to reorder his prescription, and no emergency line that still worked. Every system she trusted her life to, the banks, the hospitals, the government, had vanished into static. Outside, distant voices echoed down the street. Arguments, desperate trades, and the sound of civilization cracking under its own convenience. Angela closed her eyes, remembering the world before all this. The automatic payments, the instant deliveries, and the smug sense that they were safer because everything was connected. But now that connection had become the cage. Without it, people didn't just lose access, they lost identity. Jake pressed his head against the window, whispering, "Mom, I saw people lighting fires by the bridge. Maybe they're helping." She nodded but didn't move. She knew what he'd seen, not helpers, just survivors. And survivors had stopped sharing. Minutes turned into hours. The heat wrapped around them like a wet blanket, suffocating and relentless. Tom stirred weakly, his voice barely a rasp. "Angie, remember the cabin? The one by your dad's lake." Her throat tightened. "That cabin? No power, no signal, no Wi-Fi. She used to hate it." "Yeah," she said softly. "Maybe we were better there." His hand went limp before she could answer. Angela didn't cry. Not then. She just sat there, frozen, the world buzzing faintly with the sound of distant generators and failing batteries. When dawn came, she stepped out of the car, the air thick with decay and burnt fuel. Around her, people stumbled like ghosts, some begging, some bartering, all broken by the silence of systems they couldn't fix. She looked at her phone one last time. No signal, no service, just the faint reflection of her own tear-streaked face. Then she dropped it into a puddle. The splash sounded like a closing door. "Come on," she told her kids, her voice steady now, something fierce behind the exhaustion. "We're done waiting for someone to turn the world back on." They started walking, Away from the city, away from the towers, into the quiet. For the first time, the silence didn't scare her. It felt honest, because Angela finally understood what no one had told them. When power goes out, real power shifts. And maybe, just maybe, the only way to survive what's coming is to stop depending on the things that made us feel alive but kept us from truly living. The neighborhood came alive again. The whir of air conditioners, the glow of screens, and the smell of fresh coffee brewing like nothing had ever happened. News anchors smiled through perfect lighting, calling it a temporary infrastructure glitch. People laughed, shopped, and scrolled, eager to forget the week that had stripped them bare. But Angela couldn't forget. She saw the cracks behind every flickering streetlight, the fragility behind every welcome back online message. She walked past a grocery store that now offered offline backup servers as a selling point. The same store that had turned her away when her kids were hungry. The cashier smiled, asking, "Would you like to try our new contactless rewards?" Angela forced a smile, handed over a few paper bills and said, "No, thank you. I'll take mine the old way." The kid looked at her like she was from another century. Maybe she was. A century that still remembered touch, trust, and truth. At home, she cleaned out an old cookie tin, the same one her mother used to keep sewing needles in. Into it, she placed what little cash she had, a spare flashlight, and a printed photo of her family, something real, something that couldn't be erased with a reboot. Her husband, Tom, was recovering, sitting by the window as the world buzzed back to its artificial rhythm. "You still don't trust it?" he asked gently. Angela looked outside, saw delivery drones cutting across the orange sky, neighbors glued to phones again, their fear replaced by convenience. "Trust," she said quietly. "It's not about trust. It's about memory." Because the storm hadn't just taken their power, it had exposed the illusion of it. For days, she'd watched a city starve not from lack of food, but from the death of connection. And as the world moved on, Angela realized most people didn't want to learn. They just wanted to log back in. That night, before bed, she opened the tin box one more time. The bills were crisp, the flashlight heavy in her hand. For the first time in a long while, she felt something the internet could never give her: control. And as she turned off the light, the hum of electricity returning through the walls, she whispered to herself, "Next time I'll be ready." Because in a world that lives and dies by a signal, survival isn't about strength anymore. It's about remembering what's real. That silence still haunts her, not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that hums with the sound of everything you took for granted gone. It was the silence of locked doors, of machines waiting for signals that never came, of children asking questions no parent should have to answer. When the lights died, it wasn't darkness that scared people. It was the realization that they didn't know how to live without being plugged in. Angela would replay those nights in her mind, the cold glow of her dead phone, the echo of transaction failed, the way neighbors stopped making eye contact because everyone was surviving, no one was living. The storm had stripped away the illusion that technology made them safe. It only made them dependent. Weeks later, life looked normal again. Bills auto-paid, food delivered, notifications buzzing like a heartbeat. But Angela knew better now. Every tap to pay, every update, every error-fixed message felt like a quiet reminder of the leash she'd once ignored. She still used her phone and still paid her bills online, but in her kitchen, tucked behind the flour jar, sat that little metal tin. A box of rebellion. A box of memory. Because she knew when the next silence comes, and it will, no app, no algorithm, no smiling tech ad will save them. Only what's real will. So she teaches her kids differently now. How to light a candle. How to count cash. How to remember that convenience isn't the same as control. And as she tells their story, she looks straight into the lens, into us. "If the storm hit tonight," she says, her voice steady, "and your phone died, would you still exist?" If this story made you think, hit like, share it, and comment on what you would do. Because the next blackout won't just test our power. It'll test our humanity.